so much. So this is our second Digital AdOps webinar. We are effectively replicating what we do as physical events every 6 months here at IAB Australia. We alternate between Melbourne and Sydney. And I think actually last week we would have all been together in Melbourne at PwC for the 6-monthly event there, but unfortunately not. So we replicated it by doing a series of 4 webinars focusing on different topics, and today's is focused on programmatic. So we, and as some background for these events, we tend to focus more on the operational side of things. So we're happy to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit more than normal, and tends to attract a fairly broader audience now, as we've run almost 10 events in the last 6 or 7 years, but traditionally it's sort of ad operations, tech ops, programmatic specialists. So we like to dive into the details. So today we are going to be looking at the topic of programmatic, in particular innovations that we're seeing in programmatic in relation to header bidding and opportunities there. And we're not going to look so much at the mechanics, even though one of our councils are currently reviewing the auction mechanics handbook, which we'll have out by September, the updated version. We're going to look a little bit more in terms of what are some of the opportunities cross-device, rather than the mechanics of it or the prevalence of server-side implementation, etc. So we want to see how to manage yields across not only video, but increasingly the opportunities we're seeing across devices such as CTV and OTT. So today we've got a fantastic selection of industry specialists here to help us out. We will start with a presentation from the wonderful Tsang from PubMatic, who'll give us just a general overview, specifically looking at some of the innovations that we're seeing are now available here in Australia across CTV and OTT. Then we're joined, and it's a pleasure to have Craig Berlingo, who's a long-standing expert in the space, who's recently joined PubMatic from Colorado. He's dialing in, so I'll have a one-to-one with him. We'll do a bit more of a product deep dive. And please, as attendees, you have the opportunity to send some questions through on the Q&A. I'll try and weave them into the conversation with Craig. And we'll then have a broader industry panel with Greer from the Trade Desk, Luke from Seven, and Jodi from Publicis. And again, please feel free to send some questions in, and I'll try and weave it into the conversation with Greer, Luke, and Jodi, and we'll also we'll keep Craig on for that one too. Keep him busy. So for now, thank you very much, and I'll let Tina take over and kick us off. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tina.
Thanks, Jonas. Can you hear me okay? Thanks again for the intro. As Jonas said, I'm Tina from PubMatic, and today I want to talk about how sell-side technology can fuel buy-side innovation in CTV. So I want to start with some data on video streaming and its movement in Australia. The caveat is that this is all pre-COVID. COVID has obviously accelerated the switch to video streaming, but the signs were there even before the pandemic hit. According to eMarketer's Global Media Intelligence Report in 2019, live broadcast TV is still the dominant form of TV consumption across the country, but video streaming is catching up, with both SVOD, which is subscription-based video streaming services like Netflix, and BVOD, which is broadcaster on-demand services, making gains on live TV. Video on-demand services, so encompassing both SVOD and BVOD, increased by 11% year-on-year from H1 2018 to H1 2019, and unsurprisingly, usage is more prevalent amongst younger audiences in Australia, with up to 93% of 16 to 24-year-olds watching video on demand. We have the viewing data by age bracket, and this decreases as we go up in age, as you would expect. But we still have 64% of 55 to 64-year-olds watching video on demand, which is still a significant portion, and further shows what the viewing habits look like for more than half the population now. Sorry. Okay, so here's some additional data showing the growth in BVOD via CTV. This is Think TV's latest TV Everywhere report showing BVOD consumption and how it increased by 37% year on year from H2 2018 to H2 2019. The same report actually also found that almost 51% of all daily hours spent consuming BVOD were spent on CTV, with the remaining portion of BVOD being watched on other devices split equally across tablets and laptops. Okay, so that was all pre-COVID. What have we seen since then? Okay, so the full disclaimer: this is US data, but we're seeing similarities between this and the Australian market. In the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, what we've seen is a shift in the way that people consume content as they adjust to a stay-at-home lifestyle. It's no surprise that CTV supply has increased by up to 40%, again, because people are spending a lot more time at home. However, this hasn't translated into higher CPMs, with the majority of them staying flat, as approximately 90% of programmatic CTV transacts via fixed-rate deals. Because of this, the additional supply isn't being monetized, resulting in a missed opportunity for both advertisers and publishers. So what is the industry expecting to see from this? We have US research reports predicting that advertisers' upfront TV spending will decline by 1/3 from last year. 4 in 10 research respondents believed that TV networks will abandon the upfront buying model and move to a just-in-time buying model. Almost half of the respondents said that nobody will purchase more than a quarter of their TV inventory during this year's upfront. US researchers have also estimated that for the 2020 to 2021 TV season, inventory sold upfront would account for 40 to 60% of total US TV network ad inventory. Normally, upfront spending accounts for 70 to 80% of this inventory, so this is a decline that they're predicting, and cancellations could get as high as 25%, according to ad buyers. Normally, one of the advantages of buying inventory upfront is that it's discounted, but with TV CPMs dropping, the difference in pricing between upfront and non-upfront inventory shrunk in Q2, according to research data. If upfront and non-upfront prices become more similar, that will erode the value of the upfront, and this will change buying behavior. So we've established that there's a revenue opportunity on OTT and CTV. So what's keeping publishers from fully embracing programmatic OTT? What keeps them up at night? The main concerns are around preserving inventory value. While over 50% of CTV is transacted programmatically, a very small portion of this is actually auction-driven. As I mentioned before, approximately 90% of programmatic CTV has been transacted via upfront fixed-rate deals. And this is largely due to value concerns by publishers and quality concerns from buyers. Programmatic has been viewed as a means for automated delivery rather than an avenue for inventory discovery and market price setting. But as we've shown, the lack of market-driven auction dynamics is limiting the potential of programmatic CTV. With upfront commitments shrinking, buyers are looking for flexible buying models with market-driven pricing. Otherwise, inventory will continue to go unfilled. The viewer experience is the highest priority, where serving no ad is better than serving the wrong ad. The quality of the ad also has to match the quality of the content. But complicated tech and complicated workflows, such as the stitching together of advertising and content and demand coming from multiple sources, can lead to latency and ad load issues. While complex ad pod business rules, like advertiser or category separation and sales channel conflicts, can further limit demand. Transparency and control. So even in the instances where auctions are utilized, waterfall setup within the ad server dominates. As we know, sequential bidding is inefficient and it leaves money on the table, as prioritization rules limit the advertiser's opportunity to see and bid on inventory that could otherwise drive higher CPMs. Also, ad servers rely on legacy technology that wasn't designed with programmatic innovation in mind, and may struggle to support features like parallel auctions or dynamic ad pod assembly. Ad servers have a bias towards direct sold inventory over programmatic as well, offering first look to direct business. Final decisioning at the ad server can also lead to blind spots in ad pod assembly, as the technology is designed to maximize ad slot fill rather than holistic pod creation. Without question, OTT is ripe for innovation. In order to capture the potential of programmatic, OTT publishers need control over automated solutions that open new demand opportunities, maximize yield and fill for the entire ad pod, and solve for complicated ad pod challenges, whilst ensuring the highest quality viewer experiences. So what's keeping advertisers from fully capitalizing on a programmatic OTT today? Again, approximately 90% of programmatic CTV is transacted via fixed rate deals, largely due to quality concerns. But the lack of market-driven auction dynamics limits the potential for programmatic CTV. Dynamic pricing flexibility within brand-safe marketplaces is key. Buyers miss out on full opportunities to view and bid on programmatic inventory in a waterfall setup. The walled gardens and ad server-driven solutions bias direct business over programmatic demand, meaning advertisers never get the opportunity to bid on relevant inventory. The video content may not be properly passed in their requests, so bids may seem randomly discarded because of publisher business rules. There may be a long delay between winning an auction and the actual serving of the impression. Also, as ad pods are assembled from demand from different tech partners, publishers lack the control and visibility to ensure competitive separation, frequency capping, and back-to-back ads. To do this, they need solutions that optimize the entire ad pod, not just each ad slot. The viewer experience is paramount, but the stitching of content and ads together in CTV requires additional layers of technology that we don't require for TV, resulting in latency and buffering, or ads not loading at all. So what does the future of programmatic OTT look like? In an ideal scenario, buyers and publishers would be able to run server-to-server auctions within private marketplaces. This would reduce latency and the time it takes between a winning bid and the serving of an impression, whilst also assuring the advertiser that they're transacting across brand-safe inventory. Centralizing all of the programmatic and direct demand would give buyers a holistic view of the inventory available and give them more opportunities to monetize, ensuring the publisher also receives the highest revenue for every single impression. The ability to optimize the entire ad pod will address the issue of competitive separation, frequency capping, and back-to-backs. Lastly, bringing it all back to the importance of the viewer experience, being able to deliver the right ad at the right time without latency or loading issues, and overcoming technical issues from working with stitches and multiple demand sources is what the industry is striving for. All of these points would be addressed by moving OTT away from the traditional waterfall setup to header bidding with the right solution. Which of course is a convenient segue for me to introduce OPENWRAP OTT, which is PubMatic's server-side video header bidding solution. OPENWRAP OTT helps owners and distributors of OTT content, as well as brand advertisers, realize the full economic potential of programmatic by applying pre-bid server-powered header bidding to ad pod creation and optimization. It centralizes 100% of direct and programmatic demand from all sources, including exchanges, DSPs, ad servers, and SSAI vendors within a parallel auction. It allows you to optimize the entire ad pod. You can balance monetization, business rules, and user experience across the full duration of the ad pod and deliver TV-like experiences. So streamlines the path from the ad call to the ad delivery with a server-side video stack to reduce latency and deliver viewers with a TV-like user experience. OPENWRAP OTT also has full support for CTV devices, mobile and desktop OTT content. So the major publisher benefits of OPENWRAP OTT are, flattens the waterfall. So all demand partners will see all the available inventory and have the opportunity to monetize it. This drives competition amongst the partners, and publishers should see an increase in CPMs. Faster ad loads, the server-to-server auctions reduce latency, timeouts and buffering, which improves the viewer experience. Ad pod control and performance, the ability to optimize by the entire ad pod will help resolve issues around frequency capping, back-to-back ads, and competitive exclusions. And it's powered by Prebid. Since it's built on Prebid, publishers continue to have the same transparency and control through this open source solution. The benefits for advertisers are buying efficiency. With curated marketplace inventory, this addresses buyers' concerns around quality and gives them the flexibility to have dynamic auctions in addition to the fixed price deals. Advertisers can also take benefits, or take advantage of our SPO partnerships. First look access expands first look access to programmatic and direct inventory. Bid transparency and ad pod optimization. So with the ability to optimize the full ad pod assembly, this solves a lot of current issues faced by buyers, again, around back-to-backs, competitive exclusions, and frequency capping. It also enables proper bid parameters to be included in the requests to maximize the responses from the advertisers. And lastly, the improved viewer experience. The reduction in latency through the server-to-server auctions should also mean a reduction in buffering and a better ability to deliver ads, increasing viewability and the overall viewing experience for the viewer. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you very much. That definitely gets us going. Thank you. And if there's any specific questions around that content or the product, we'll weave that into the conversation that I'll have now with Craig. So feel free to jump in from sunny Colorado, Craig.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Excellent. Thanks again for joining us. I know it's a bit later where you are, 8 p.m. or something.
7:20.
Okay, not too bad. 1 o'clock, isn't it? I thought we would just dive into the detail a little bit more with you on a one-to-one, if that's okay. And if there's any questions from any of the attendees, please send them through, and I'll try and weave them in as I've mentioned. So we've recently here in Australia put out so we're about to put out a CTV paper, and one of the distinctions we had to make from a technical perspective was it's not just a telly screen from a buying perspective. There is something technically device specific in terms of CTV and OTT. So if we can just start with CTV, what makes delivering advertising via solutions such as OPENWRAP more just trickier than just good old school desktop or mobile?
Yeah. It's in some ways you would think that delivering an ad onto a television might be simpler because the creatives themselves typically are video files that fire, some pixels. But all of the things that ad tech has been built around and assumed for the past, 20 something years, a lot of them don't work in CTV. So for example, there are no cookies. There are rarely device IDs, or they're there, but they're not consistent. Sometimes they're hidden intentionally or not intentionally. So there's really not great ways to identify the user in the standard ways that a bidder might know how to do that. Other things are, JavaScript doesn't work on a television. So things like being able to, see viewability and fraud and run a bunch of code just doesn't apply. So, it's mainly because it's a new medium. IAB has been great about putting out, VAST4 and guidelines on different connected televisions and how they can implement device IDs. But it's going to take a while for everyone to really get up to speed. It kind of reminds me of like the different browsers in the very beginning of display, where you had all the a lot of different competitors, different versions of it, and you had to have your creative try to fit into each one, or mobile, where there were a lot of different operating systems. Eventually it all gets smoothed out, and this will as well, but it's gonna take a little while.
Yeah. So obviously, you can't have a client, you can't have the opportunity of running it on the telly as you can in a browser, for instance, through the early implementations. So the distinctions are there, but there's still people that sort of just see it. Isn't YouTube part of the same thing? It's just sort of a big screen. It could be on a telly. It could be here. No, we want to make it clearer. So in regards to OTT then, what are the distinctions there in terms of delivery on OTT devices versus, say, pre-roll or standard video?
Yeah, so OTT, it gets even more complicated. So, just for people who aren't familiar with these terms, CTV is the actual device, the television. You're sitting on your couch, you're watching a TV, and it might come through, might be a smart TV or come through an attached device. OTT means you're watching long form content. You're watching a show or a movie, and that might be on a television. That's great. It also might be, on your phone while you're standing in line. Nobody goes anywhere these days, so I don't even know what example I was going to say at the bank, but we do all that on our phone anyways. Or you're watching your iPad in bed or whatever it may be. So that is OTT. It's television content. And when you have television content, there's a different expectation of what the ad experience is like. A pre-roll makes sense before a 30-second cat video. But in the middle of a show, you want a commercial break, or at least you expect a commercial break as a viewer. So once you have that, that's a new concept for ad tech, right? Where you're not really trying necessarily to fill one ad slot, give me an ad, here you go. It's more of, I have 90 seconds. How do I fill this? Is it, 6 15-second ads? Is it one big, long 90-second ad? If I have a lot of different ads, are they all going to be the same? That's a terrible viewer experience. So there's all these just assumptions and business rules that are really built into an ad pod, into a commercial break, that have been brought over from television, but become very tricky once you're trying to, juggle demand from your ad server, from different exchanges, from DSPs, from seat holders, and put all that into one particular ad pod. It gets very, very complicated.
Yeah, so some of the technical difficulties, I assume, in terms of having so much different types of supply in one wrapper. Can you talk us through that and the sort of parallel auction terminology that's often being used and some of the intricacies involved there?
Yeah, so we use the term header bidding because everyone understands what that means. It's really a universal auction, and when you're a publisher and you're trying to fill those 90 seconds or 3 back-to-back ads, you want to be able to pull from all of your demand, from all of your advertiser-buyer relationships, and be able to put them all together and figure out what the best combination of ads is going to be for this user at this particular time. Now, one of the challenges is that these might be all different platforms. Part of it is you can communicate through RTV through some of them. Some of it, it's an ad server and it's, has its own, weird little quirks. But if you really want to make the best ad pod, you have to look at it all at the same time. So that's part of, we're at PubMatic, we're taking the header bidding concept and applying it over to the entire ad pod. So you're not using it just for, let me find the highest CPM, let's compete everything. I mean, that's useful to make sure that the ad really wants that slot. But also just to say, how do we fill out this ad pod? Let's get all the demand that's out there. Let's survey it, and then let's massage the right combination to deliver back now that'll benefit the viewer, the publisher, and have all the business rules that make it valuable supply for the advertiser.
Yeah, it's exciting to be able to democratize that, literally all of the supply that we can, and give buyers that unprecedented level of access. But also, what about some of the controls within RTB for these opportunities where you mentioned the management of pod opportunities or seeded opportunities, and also how you manage competitive separation, for instance? How about these sort of more intricate controls?
Yeah, I mean, RTB was not, well, at least the first versions were not built thinking about context of what other ads are around, right? So, as I said before, it's, can I have an ad? Here's your ad. And that was good enough. In an ad pod, there's context. Like, can I have an ad? But I've already delivered this particular ad. Don't show that again. I don't want to see this, show my viewers the same ad a bunch of times in a row. or, I have an auto advertiser and I don't, that advertiser doesn't want their competitor to run. So, RTB is not really, initially built for that, but there are some interesting pieces in it that I think people who, speak that language will appreciate. And, the biggest one is advertiser and category. So when a bidder comes back and says, here's my creative, here's my commercial, they're also tagging it with the advertiser domain and the IAB category, right? So in that case, you can say, okay, well, I know, this is the advertiser and this is the category. I can make sure that I haven't already shown that advertiser or shown someone who has that category, if those are the rules for the ad pod. So, there's that meta information that comes back. One of the challenges is that a lot of bidders might still, that might be their best ad, that's their best shot, they really want to deliver it, and they send it back, and they're kind of missing an opportunity if it's going to get thrown out. So on the other side, from the exchange or the OPENWRAP or the SSP side, on the bid request, we can say, hey, block this advertiser. Give me your best bid, but make sure it's not, these 20 different advertisers or these categories or whatever it might be. So that there is sort of an opportunity cost that you're avoiding, where they can bid with something that has a much higher chance of actually winning.
Yeah, interesting. And obviously with these additional attributes, I mean, at times you can throttle it almost too much, but it allows you to have layers of complexity that you can have more granularity with those opportunities. That sounds excellent.
Yeah, you're communicating context to an extent, and then there still has to be a certain amount of logic when you are looking at this big pile of demand, and you have all the information about it, but you still got to figure out how to put it together in the best way and deliver it back to the user, which is its own challenge, but at least you have the information coming back.
Yeah. I think from the very early days of digital, we've been slightly obsessed by, perhaps quite rightly, getting a hold of brand money, getting into some of those sort of sweet TV dollars, as it were. And we're definitely seeing the blurring of the two and the opportunities opening up with both addressable and linear, and that's exciting. But do you feel products such as OPENWRAP OTT, are there going to be different types of metrics that we're going to start defining rather than certainly the direct response metrics? But are you introducing new metrics or aligning different metrics to more traditional digital metrics?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's still going to look at their reports and still, try to get the CPM that they want. You're not going to have, a click-through rate on a television, but you might have, a completion rate or quartiles and those sorts of things. And those are all important. And I think, in a lot of ways, that's where we are today, is still kind of looking at those old numbers. But with the new concept of the ad pod, of the commercial break, really what you're trying to do is you're trying to maximize your revenue for that entire pod, right? So while each individual slot is important, the way you put them together might change the overall revenue. So from a publisher perspective, really that's what they're looking for, is how can I maximize my revenue for those 90 seconds or whatever it might be, in a way that, how can I do that with still maintaining all of my business rules, all the competitive separation and all those sorts of things. So you're really looking at the ad pod overall, and then from a viewer perspective, it's not necessarily a metric, but it's that viewer experience which is extremely, extremely important. They want to make sure that they have a good quality experience, a television experience when they're watching. So that has to be there as well. And then from the buyer perspective, as long as those business rules are there, then the supply becomes more valuable. They're not going up against their competitor. So there's a lot, where having that ad pod kind of brings about a whole nother set of things that you can optimize for, and it kind of is layered on top of all the things you're already optimizing for. So it's it's an interesting opportunity that I think the ecosystem is going to kind of uncover over the next few years, and we're trying to make a big head start on that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting critical trend. I'm generally excited by it, and we'll keep an eye on it in future events and with some of the work that we're doing, whether it's on the mechanics side through standards and guidelines or some of the recent papers we'll be putting out through the Video Council on CTV, etc. But Greg, thank you so much. That's fireside either. There's no G&Ts, I'm afraid. But we're going to keep you on for the wider panel, if that's all right.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back to the slide so I can introduce everybody else. And also we do have a couple of questions coming in from the audience, which is they're probably more for the broader group. So if I could have everyone in from Jodi, Luke and Greer, please join us. Thank you very much. I'm excited to have such a representative group to talk through this topic from a DSP, from one of our major publishers here, broadcaster that has this type of supply, and Jodi from Publicis, who's representing the agency that's focusing on it for their clients. But Luke, I'm going to start with you first of all, just to see in the current climate from a publisher's perspective. You know, I imagine, like many publishers, you're seeing a lot of traffic, you're seeing increased audiences across all the various opportunities you can offer out through your supply. And how are you managing to maintain your premiums for some of the really high quality opportunities, such as across different devices, CTV and OTT? How are you managing that?
Yeah, Jonas, yeah, I mean, interesting. Obviously, the silver lining of recent times has definitely been audience growth. As we've got more people at home and more people are streaming at different times of day. And I guess it's it's partly in terms of what's been happening with COVID, but it's also been the content that's been driving that. But it's an interesting question, because there's been a lot of talk about fill rates dropping over recent times. But from my perspective, the only instance where the reason that fill rates have dropped is because we've had supply that has skyrocketed. So I look at it and I think that dropping our rates based on the fill rate is really counterintuitive to what is happening in video. Because if we have the same amount of demand, all we're doing is actually running the same amount of volume for a smaller investment. So if you're an advertiser paying, let's say, $50 on a CPM, you're certainly going to be putting a frequency cap in place there. So unlike display, the majority of our business, and Tina touched on this earlier, well over 85% of our video inventory is actually at a fixed rate. So we can maintain that premium when we do have spikes in supply. Now we're happy to negotiate, but we tend to negotiate those deals directly if people are looking at trying to drive additional volume, and we can negotiate that on share and volume and targeting. And we've done that recently with Big Brother, which has seen some big audiences. But there were two ways to be able to do that, to be able to drive that. Really, are bringing in new advertisers into BVOD. We're seeing more advertisers coming in all the time, but there is still more to come. And I think also from evolving, or for existing advertisers to evolve their story beyond just a pure frequency cap. And I think that there's opportunities to be able to play out more of a story, and we've got the technology in place to be able to play that out, and to be able to drive greater volumes and perhaps more competitive yields that they're after.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, that's great to hear. I've certainly been around long enough, even 9/11 or GFC, and these instances in histories where suddenly, as on the sell side, you end up dropping your pants, and you never get the premium rates back. Once you've dropped the rates, you just kind of, what have I done? It's good to see that there is a little more discipline these days, and you guys handling it so sensibly. And Jodi, from your perspective, from a buyer's perspective, having access to more unified supply across devices, are you excited by the opportunity to provide your clients with more flexibility and creativity as a result?
We're always excited to offer our clients more flexibility and creativity. And I think it's just, making the buying process more simple for us is also really important. I mean, everybody knows the kind of pressure agencies are under at all times. And, when we can make things really easy is when things are really successful. And I think it's one of the best things to come out of the last sort of 3 or 4 months is that everybody's been working on how to make trading so much more simple. And that will give us really good long-term benefits and set us up to make things run much more smoothly next year.
It's interesting. So that's one of the sort of positives out of this time that's coming out. I've heard others across the industry too but it's nice
Yeah.
you can build out some disciplines which you'll stretch out regardless of the situation.
Yeah, and it's happening with offline as well as online. So I mean, I think it's one of those moments where we've all had to sort of step ahead, and like comparing this to the GFC, I mean that hardly made a dent on us in Australia. This is like the first time really we as an industry have gone through any kind of like big change that we've all had to like work really hard to make things easier and better and faster and more flexible. And I think the publishers that have won in this scenario are the ones that have been able to be more flexible and have made things really easy, because you've got to turn things around so quickly, and we don't know what's happening or when it's going to happen, or if there's going to be a second wave. But we're all really prepared to handle the short-term changes that have come up because of it. So I mean, it's going to only put us in better stead for future.
Yeah, interesting. Actually, I'm gonna ask you, Craig, as well, if you've seen anything from an innovation or technology perspective over this period that kind of find it you like the look of, or you think you're doing something differently as a result, with your experience. Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of accelerated, or how should I put it? So, everyone is at home and they're watching TV, and there's been a pretty big spike in supply. And there are a lot of, the buyers have, in many cases, shifted how they want to buy. There are new buyers that are coming in and trying out CTV. There really isn't the flexibility of a market that you should have to be able to absorb that sort of change on both the supply and the demand side. So I think that's where the move to programmatic will help a lot. Not necessarily, when I say programmatic, I don't necessarily just mean, an open auction. It could be a, private auction with a high floor. But just different sort of relationships that are not, based off of the upfront model of, let's sell a show, several months in advance. But doesn't necessarily have to be all the way to RTV, where you only have 100 milliseconds to match supply and demand. So I think, it's really opened up a lot of people's eyes that, it's not just necessarily a global pandemic that you have to think about, but, something goes viral, suddenly, something takes off, or, your biggest advertiser, decides to shift gears, that you need to have some sort of flexibility built into the system. So I like that it's kind of, given a lot of people knocking on our door, and it's there's a lot of interest in just how can we have a more flexible liquid market.
Now, just to shift back a little bit to the core topic, and in terms of supply path optimization, SPO, and managing of that, I'm going to ask you, Greer, from the trade desk. With this increased supply and increased biddable media, does that put additional strains on the work that you're trying to do to manage the different options in terms of the paths that you want to offer your clients through your platform?
Yes, it has. And I guess we've been talking a lot about the increased supply, as well, it's off the back of COVID, this influx, but what's been compounding that has been the way that header bidding has been functioning more recently, and that's with publishers. They've added a second wrapper to their ad stack, which from the buyer perspective doubles the volume of bid requests coming through. So not only is that a big cost to handle on the buy side, but it's also, from an SPO perspective, causes some issues from a transparency. So SPO is all about transparency and being able to optimize to the best supply path. And with the current space and the influx of supply, it makes it more difficult. So what we've actually done at the trade desk a couple of months ago is we've taken a firm stance to say to the supply side, we want you to only send through, or to only have one wrapper in the header to help us improve that supply path optimization. And from an optimization standpoint, in the most basic activation as a trader, what you need is transparency and as many data points as you have access to make the right decision from a buying perspective. With the current infrastructure, it's muddied and it's more difficult to achieve. So we're excited to see that improvement, and obviously improved transparency on the supply side improves the ecosystem, which again improves the trust in the whole programmatic industry. So we see it a great step forward, and adding to what all the work we've been doing as an industry across with ads.txt, supply chain, all the supply side stuff. This is just going to be one additional factor to help us improve that.
Yep, and that's we're actually segueing into that next week. We'll have the tech lab on, and we'll be talking through those transparency standards in a little more detail for everyone, and we'll also be looking at the impact on aspects like brand safety and also fraud. So look forward to that. Actually, Luke, we've got a question that's come in from the attendees. It sort of seems to be split between yourself and Jodi, but I'm going to start with you. So in terms of the supply for shows like Big Brother and what you're seeing, how much of that ends up being your sort of upfront direct deals that are predetermined, and how much are you increasing the amount of supply that's being enabled through different programmatic pipes or different solutions, or is a lot of it kind of sold up front?
Yeah, listen, I think there's three ways in terms of how we're approaching our big shows. We've obviously got sponsors, there's direct IOs, and there's obviously also programmatic. I mean, programmatic by far and away is becoming the predominant means with which buyers are now accessing video inventory. We would see that range anywhere between 60 up to 70% of our inventory at the moment. You know, sponsorships are very much about association with the program, and from a broadcast perspective, that's really important around your position in break, whether it be first or last, or you know, in the right ad break. And we're going to see more and more of that. I think that activity actually shift because people want to be able to hold on to the data. They still want the association, but they still want the data that they can get when they're buying it programmatically. So. In terms of the splits really are 30 to 40% direct IO versus programmatic, and that's changing. That's definitely growing. Yep.
And from a buy side perspective, then Jodi, you're sort of attracted by both, as it were. You want to have some guaranteed buying where you kind of know the reach and frequency of what you're getting, but you'll play around with the variable pricing in programmatic.
We actually buy most of our inventory on a guaranteed CPM upfront, so not even a UFR, and that is for a couple of reasons. Like, we like to give the publishers security as well as us, and it helps us secure a better rate and a flat rate for clients, which some clients really, really like. Variable can be better. I mean, if you're looking at purely price-based, obviously when there's huge spikes, and not just because of things like COVID, but also, for example, The Handmaid's Tale and SBS, like, they will always get a spike, and you can rarely fill those spikes because they're unpredictable. Yes, you can probably pick the inventory up cheaper then, but I think it's always a combination, and whatever. It obviously depends on client goals, but for us, we prefer the stability of a fixed CPM because it helps us plan and keep our clients aware of what rates are going around.
Yeah, that's interesting. Good to see the good old relationship is still important.
Yes, I think it's the most important, and I think everyone forgets about this all the time, but we can't do our job without publishers. They are the most important people that we have and the most important relationships, and Luke was talking about it before when you're talking about dropping rates. If you do it once, we're media buyers, we will keep that rate forever. It's always in our mind. Like, you can't give it to us and be like, it's only for the next 3 months. But also what we don't want to do is we don't want to ever push that relationship so far that everybody's unhappy. These things are valuable, they have to have a value, so it's always a dangerous game for publishers to play, to drop rates when there are spikes, whatever the spikes are, because that we can never forget that happened.
It's trust, isn't it? The end of financial year sale always. Now,
actually, do you mind if I just add my perspective from the buy side? From a purely best case scenario perspective, I think not fixed price is a great way to buy it. Of course, there are other things that play into that, but the moment that you've got a variable rate, you can start to mirror what we're kind of doing in display, where you can overlay an audience, and that one audience that you really want to be in front of, you can pay a higher price to be in front of them. And then conversely, if it's more of a reach campaign, you can pay that lower price. So it's not all about getting it as cheap as we possibly can. It's also about addressability and being able to target a brand's audience. But I also do understand the other perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you buy, like, 'cause when we buy, we do have a fixed CPM, but obviously we're still trading programmatically, so we can still access all of the benefits of programmatic trading, including data overlays and whatever else we need. It's just having a flat base. And then, you know, on top of that, we can access other inventory through the open market if we need to top up, but it's like a dual purpose. It gives the publishers a commitment for the year that they know that they can count on, which then leads to you know, a preferential rate. Then it also, we can also then, with any of the activity that goes on top of that, we can also access you know, through the open market at whatever rate that is going to be. But it's kind of best of both worlds.
Yeah. And to give you that flexibility, obviously, particularly with this additional supply, you've got to ensure that it's all plugged in and available if you want to layer in those more complex buying strategies. So, Craig, from a more technical perspective, then, and sort of the plumbing, as it were, how do you fit into the video stack? So we seem to be talking about ad servers traditionally, but what about video ad servers or SSAI vendors, for instance? Are there the more specific work required there?
Yeah. So. I mean, so the video stack, I mean, every publisher is, you know, trying to make sure that they deliver videos that look really good. And, you know, they're not delivering you know, content that's supposed to be for a phone on a television. You know, so that is the main focus. And so, you know, there are a lot of different platforms that come into play. So, you know, one of the big ones is SSAI, the Stitcher, the one that actually streams it out. And then monetization kind of comes secondary. So, you know, what a lot of people do and what we do is allow, you know, just a simple VAS tag to call a platform to say, okay, well, you know, let me monetize from there. One of the things I think is interesting about this conversation is, you know, the prominence of deal IDs in this, you know, it as part of being in the middle of the market, and the opportunities for people who, you know, are, you know, anywhere between buyer and seller, to be able to curate the inventory, put deal IDs around it, describe it better. Because one of the challenges in that video stack is by the time it goes from your TV to your SSAI, to your ad server, to the exchange, to the DSP, sometimes you don't have all the information there. You know, there is, you know, it's not necessarily transparency. It could be because, you know, they're trying to, you know, control prices or whatever it may be. I think there are opportunities for everyone kind of upstream to be able to say, let me curate the inventory for you. Let me put a deal ID on it. Let me describe it a little bit better, something that I know that we don't necessarily want to put it into a bid request. So there's, you know, because everything is server side, because there are all these other platforms, I think, you know, whoever's closest to the viewer gets to see a little bit more about what's really going on.
Yeah, that's good. That's great insight. And actually, we're going to stay on that topic a little bit. We're going to gradually move more left field. Now, so Luke, for you as a publisher, and you know, there we're starting to talk about identifiers and enriching what you can offer out. How, I know we've done a few webinars on it, but now I've got you, Luke, you can't escape. What's your, how do you feel about the forthcoming degradation of cookies come 2022, sometime in 2022? How are Seven preparing for that?
Yeah, I mean, there has been a lot spoken about that of late, but I got to say we're really well placed because you know, by far and away the bulk of the inventory that we have is on connected TV and also on in-app activity. And as we all know, cookies aren't in those on those device types or in those environments. So very little of what we do is actually in web. But in terms of how we're approaching is that we are definitely going down, you know, using CTV as the model and going down the ad ID as the future of how to do that. And what we plan to do is to be able to lasso that ad ID with our declared login data, and we're very aggressive about our about scaling our first party logged in verified data. We've got 3.4 million logins that are verified at the moment. You know, we saw a 30% increase of our age and gender logged in users off the back of Big Brother. So we're definitely using those and stitching those together. And you know, people-based addressability is going to be the future of how this is done. I think that's good for audiences. I think that's good for advertisers. And yeah, we'll certainly survive in a cookieless environment.
Yeah, it's just about planning ahead and having the capabilities. That's great. And we will in a few weeks be looking at having yet another identity webinar where we will look at a more sort of practical next steps for business generally, get an update on Project Rearc through Tech Lab, and a bit of input in terms of some of what's happening here. So I do look forward to that. And the other topic that's come up recently, Greer, which we talked about prior, was the Apple announcement in terms of how they're impacting with some of their changes to come in September with iOS 14, location targeting, and some of the limitations on attribution. Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, so I think it's a great move by Apple. I think there can often be a negative spin on this change, but it's actually great for the whole industry. It's great for consumers that the advertising industry is finally having this conversation with consumers about the value exchange of the open internet. And Apple really could have gone in a worse direction, which would have been to completely remove that ID, which would put us in a tougher position, but they haven't. They're willing to have that conversation. And what that conversation is with consumers is, are you willing to give a piece of your data in exchange for free content? And from, even Luke was just saying, people are logging in, inputting their data in exchange for free content. We've seen with GDPR in Europe, customers understand that value exchange and they're willing to accept it. So I think it's great, and it's been a long time coming. Like, we've been a bit slow to get there to have this conversation, but I think you've mentioned like some of the disadvantages, which yes, there will no doubt be loss in the ability to track footfall, for example, as accurately as we have been able to, and addressability, but it's the benefits completely outweigh the negatives. And it's not that we lose all addressability. Addressability and privacy friendly can coexist. So it's a great move, and I think consumers will be happier with it as well.
Yeah, it's difficult to philosophically disagree with. I mean, the location limitation is interesting. It's like a 15 square kilometer kind of band that will be described geographically that you can utilize. So there are some interesting changes to come. We'll try to keep everyone across it. We wrote an article last week with some key points. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to finish up, the last question from me anyway, with you, Jodi. I mean, with all of this and the focus, whilst it's a sort of programmatic topic, it really feels like, there's OTT, but obviously CTV, and it really feels like 2020 with pandemic and everything else, but it really feels like it's been the year of CTV so far, 2020, if we try to be positive. You get that?
Look, I mean, I fundamentally have an issue with anything being the year of anything. Remember the year of mobile that happened, like never but always?
10 years.
And I kind of feel like it's the same thing, right? You know, CTV has been gaining traction for a long time, and you know, we can call it the year of CTV, but really it's just getting sewn into the fabric of life in the same way that mobile did, and it's just going to be another device the same way mobile is. You know, and I do think that even though obviously CTV is growing really fast, it's not like the other devices aren't equally important, and especially when you're looking for things like reach. You know, you're so much better off running across all devices because you're getting different people in different times, and you know, mobile's always great. Like even to watch long form on, like it's still a really important device. So yeah, I mean, we can call it that, but I mean, I feel like we should never use that term because it's it never really comes to fruition in the way that we imagine.
Quite right. Fantastic answer.
I'll just jump in there.
Yeah.
And just to that, you know, yes, I think, you know, we're starting to see the beginnings. People are starting to understand connected TV as being, you know, the most important screen in the room. I'm being asked less and less about viewability on that device type, which I think is a good thing. But what I think we've got to be bringing new advertisers in that necessarily haven't been able to buy like a 30-second spot in Friday Night AFL on broadcast, but they can access 20 to 30,000 impressions on that big screen. And I think, yeah, we've got to educate more and more of those advertisers that to buy it, it's going to be different from how you bought digital. But I think it's a big opportunity for that band of advertiser.
Yeah, and I definitely think that is happening. You know, I mean, most of the clients that we run across CTV and all BVOD are television spenders, but we do have a lot of clients who have, you know, under $500,000 budgets that, you know, they've got to do a lot of things, they've got to reach a lot of people, and now they have the opportunity to be on the TV. Yeah, so, and viewability, I mean, you know, I hate it, but and I think I've said this 450,000 times now, but, you know, we still, as agencies, we still have global clients who have these crazy metrics that are, you know, X% viewability for X dollars, and that is a procurement thing. And, you know, it's still a thing for us. And it is still a thing that I would really like to get solved. I mean, obviously, I would prefer it if everyone could just be like, it's obviously going to be viewable, because that would be nice. But, you know, in this day and age, and especially in digital, of all the different types of media, you know, digital's gone so far into proving things and having actual numbers and measurement in a way that, you know, offline media can't, that it's an expectation now. So as boring as it is, as like we should all already get this, it is always going to be an issue until globally that changes. And so it would just be really cool if we could get a measurement.
Yeah. So you got the viewability there on the out-of-home schedules, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Because it's always 100% because it's fully loaded, man.
Yeah. Yeah, we could have a whole debate on that, actually.
I know. Look, I mean, you know, just because we can doesn't mean we should, but it doesn't, like, you know, you guys invented this measurement, and now that it's out there, you know, people want it. So it's your own fault.
Yeah. At least we're discussing it less, though. 2 years
Thank
ago,
God.
relentless. So I think that's it that we've got. If there's any other points from the panel, feel free to jump in. But that's it for the questions that I've got.